Hey there. Hi. I had written down this story called "The Phoenicians: The Fate of the Suitors," um, which I took from I think it's Thomas Bulfinch's book on mythos. It had some interesting quotes, which I'll get into, but I wanted to tell the story first. So here it is. Ulysses is floating on timbers from a shipwreck. A soft rolling wind came that pushed him to shore after much toil to find the mouth of a gentle stream. He was nearly dead, and lay there long, but retrieved soon after. He found a wood, and there he retreated to it. He there made a shift bed of leaves and rested under the branches of a tall tree. The land was known as Scheria, that's Scheria, in the country of the Phoenicians. They had originally dwelt near the Cyclops, but being suppressed of that race, migrated to the Isle of Skira or Scythia. Their king, Nostithos, poets refer to these folk as akin to the gods, who appeared manifest manifest and feasted among them when they made offerings and occasionally to solitary wayfarers. They had abundance of wealth and lived undisturbed in their remote island, away from any gain seeking men. So the legend is that they're from Scythia. Poles refer to them as gods who happened to just show up when somebody was making offerings to them, and occasionally to people praying to them. They had few weapons and did not even have quiver or bow among them. Their direct employment was of navigation. Their ships, built to the standards of flying birds, endowed with intelligence, and they knew every port and needed no pilot. Alcinous, that's Alcinous, Alcinous, the son of Nostithos, had just succeeded his father and was wise and beloved by his people. That night, the goddess Minerva sent Nausicaa, the princess, a dream to go wash the clothing for her nearing wedding the next day. So she told her parents of this, and they set about getting wagons to carry the clothes for the whole household. The queen mother came with abundance of wine and food. Virgin attendants walked while the princess plied the lash. Once arrived at the fountains, they turned out the donkeys, set about to work, and then bathed and played ball. The ball was thrown near to where Ulysses slept, and he woke naked with only branches to cover himself. He could see the maidens were of higher class, and also so broke off a branch to approach them. Her attendants fled, but Nausicaa stayed, being of stout mind, and heard the man out. She called to her maidens for cloth and soap, her brother's garments, food, and wine, for he was a shipwrecked mariner of poor circumstance, whom it was duty to cherish, for, quote, the poor and stranger are from Jove. Interesting. So they saw these kind of happenstance circumstances, as being potentially invoked by the gods, or the gods themselves. Her people responded. The princess was much taken with this handsome stranger, but chose not to ride with him as they returned. He was given directions on where the royal abode was to approach her husband, father and husband, who would be there. He was guided by a woman bearing a pitcher of water, possibly Minerva again. She observed the richness of culture, battlement structures quite unobserved himself. Upon reaching the royal abode with, I think it says lintel silver and gold, he entered a great hall with intricate. My handwriting is so bad sometimes. With intricate tapestries. The princess was at the table feasting among gold statues, which held torches. Many women did menial labors after the returning to the abode, and ships. Quote, for the Phoenician women as far exceeded all other women in the household arts as the mariners of that country did the rest of mankind in the management of ships. And that was on page 308 of The Golden Age Myths and Legends by Bulfinch. Clean water was abundant, as was the sun most of the year. So abundance of vigor of fertile lands were, and the fertile lands were abundant with gardens and vineyards. Ulysses observes the lands quickly, then approaches the chiefs and ministers and throne. He makes offering to Mercury, and to her approaches the queen, and then approaches the queen to speak his ailments and conditions, pleading for assistance to return to his native country. A noble elderly statesman stood supplicating that a stranger in poor state as such should be given a seat at the table and offered libations and sustenance, and the king gave forth his consent, informing that a council will be held the following day, and ordered lodging for his guest. That evening he was enticed by the queen, who knew her son's clothing he was wearing, to speak of his journey and the good-heartedness of their daughter. He had been at the Isle of Calypso and had departed. A storm wrecked his ship, and he had swum to shore. The king promised to furnish a ship on his behalf. A ship was outfitted, and manned, and games and feasts commenced. A bard sang a song of Troy, to which Ulysses wept, and upon this deigned to tell them the whole truth of who he was and his part in the war of Troy. He recounted his adventures since then, and the people raised sympathy and admiration for him. Gifts were given and friends made. The next day he set sail in a Phoenician vessel, returning to Ithaca, his homeland. Homer describes these ships in the Odyssey, Book 8. Quote, say from what city, from what rigorous tossed, and what inhabitants those regions boast. So shalt thou quickly the realm assigned in wondrous ships, self-moved, instinct with mind. No helm secures their course, no pilot guides. Like man intelligent, they plow the tides, conscious of every coast and every bay that lies beneath the sun's all-seeing ray. And then I hear a quote about Lord Carlisle writes that he believes this island now to be Corfu. Ulysses awakes having been transported onto the island inebriated, but does not know where he is. She's guided by, was she paid a set? Wow, I can't read that sentence. He returns to his farm and Penelope. Oh right, he makes an offering to Minerva, saying thank you. Then he returns to his wife. There were many suitors for her and his land since he had left, and some were plotting to kill his son Telemachus. He first sees Ulysses at the herdsman's home, but does not recognize him. When his mother Penelope was summoned by her son, Ulysses announced himself, and there was a warm and tearful greeting. They counseled and came up with a plan to punish the plotters. Ulysses went about as a beggar while his son went to the palace, whereupon Ulysses is admitted and finds his old dog, who remembers his master. The other suitors, after Penelope, begin to treat him insolently, but he paid no mind. A trial of skill was presented as task for her hand, as it was thought Ulysses was not returning. 12 rings were arranged in line, and he whose arrow passed through them all was to have been was to, with, and he whose arrows passed through them all was to have her as prize. A bow that had been given to Ulysses by his brother's heroes were brought. Telemachus tried to straighten it, or to string it, then the others, but no one could string the bow. Finally, Ulysses, in beggar's garb, said he would try. 2 bouts of laughter. With ease he strung the bow and let loose his arrow straight through the rings. Then he used his arrows on the plotters. Then he announced himself to his wife and household as its master and repossessed his kingdom. Quote, "Come, my friends, 'tis not too late to speak a newer world. Push off, and sitting well in order, smite the surrounding furrows, for my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset and the baths of the western stars until I die. It may be that the gulfs will wash us down. It may be we shall touch the happy isles and see the great Achilles whom we knew." And that is from Tennyson. There's another story here about the Myrmidons. Which, why not? Let's just go ahead. Jupiter, in guise of bull, carried away Europa, daughter of Agenos, king of Phoenicia. Agenor called upon his son Cadmus to search for his sister, and do not return without her. He searched but could not find her. The king of gods is Taurus, brings the maiden princess to Europa, and from the land of the early mariners, the Phoenicians. The king of gods as Taurus brings the maiden princess to Europe from the land of the early mariners, the Phoenicians. So went to the oracle to ask where he should take residence. Oracle said to go forth to find a cow and follow her until she stopped and found a city, which was called Thebes. Or I understand it could be Thebe. He found the place well, and seeking to make offering to Jupiter, they went in search of water. Presently his servants found a cave within which was a huge horrid serpent, which crested the head and had scales of gold. When they tried to retrieve some water, it came to slay them with venom and fang. Cadmus went in search of them, and when they did not return, in a skin of a lion, javelin and lance, he bravely found his dead men and swore vengeance. So, right, I guess the story is he sent his servants into the cave, and then he goes in and finds them all dead. He threw a huge stone at the serpent, but it made no impression. Next he threw his javelin, which pierced through the scales of its entrails. The serpent wrenched under pain and tried to bite the weapon, but only pushed it in further. His neck swelled with rage, and he twisted himself into a circle like a fallen log on the ground. Next, Cadmus waited until the creature raised his head and threw his spear, pinning the head to a tree. A voice was heard upon the wing, telling him to gather some of the dragon's teeth. So now it's not a serpent, but a dragon, and plant them in the hearth. He made furrows in the ground and obeyed the advice, upon which soon sprang up many warriors in full military garb. They soon were to engage against enemies nearby. But one warrior said to Cadmus, "Meddle not in our civil war," upon which they began to fight among themselves until only 5 remained who wished to pick up spade and hoe and throw down the sword. Cadmus married Harmonia, daughter of Venus, and the gods left Olympus to attend. However, since he slayed the serpent sacred to Mars, his family befell many mishaps, and his 2 daughters, Io and Semele, and Achaton and Penthus, his children, were perished, and they left Thebes. He lamented what he had done and wished himself to be a serpent, upon which he was turned into one, and Harmonia joined him. A tradition in Greece speaks of Cadmus introducing to the Greeks letters of the alphabet, which he got from the Phoenicians. Byron writes, "You have the letters Cadmus gave, think you he meant them for a slave?" The Myrmidons were soldiers of Achilles in the Trojan War, but origins of them are more laborious and peaceful. Thinking of Athens, Cephalus visited his ally Achaeus and asked assistance with Minos, the king of Crete. His request was agreed to, but noting that many people he knew were not among them. Achaeus told them of a disease that had plagued the island, and pestilence had killed many, including animals and people. The tongue grew rough and swelled, a dry mouth with open veins enlarged, gasping for air, and then when they drank the water they died. Many died in the streets and in the water. The bodies were burned in huge pyre. The king himself was about to give up and went once more to his temple height to beseech Jupiter. "O Jupiter, if thou art indeed my father and think of me, give me back my people and take me away and to die." Jupiter gave leniency, and a clap of thunder was heard, and by chance there was an oak tree, and he noticed the ants and asked for these to be his compatriots. They were called Myrmidons and served him well. So in that rendition, the Myrmidons were actually ants turned into people to serve the king. Anyway, hope you find that interesting. What I find most interesting, of course, is the ships of the Phoenicians and how they're described. And it really brings to mind, and the question in my mind is, what happened to the first books of Homer? It's pretty obvious the Iliad starts in the middle of the war. So I just wonder if there must be more references to things that certain people want to keep hidden. Anyway, have a good day, and thanks for listening. Bye-bye.